5 o'clock if you want to stop by and ask me questions. If you need to see me before the exam, please send me an email and maybe we can plan to meet on Wednesday. Yes. So you can have your questions answered before the exam. So let's get started. Let's finish our lecture. This lecture was started on Thursday, and basically it's a topic that I split the topic in two. It was monitoring and controlling the project. So I started with lecture 8B, in which we were explaining what's monitoring a project, and now we are going to transition to controlling the project. So we went through most of the topics of this agenda. There's only one thing that we need to discuss, which is the tools for control. So let me get to that point. So we stop here, and in terms of tools for control, we have already described some of the tools that you can use to control a project, and those include variance analysis, trend projections, and the last one is what we discussed on Thursday, earned value analysis. And as an example, here we have an example for trend projection. So we can plot a plan for a curve or about what you expect for the project in the future. As actual values come in with the project progress, we can plot those values as well and compare the status of the project. Using a dashed line, the project manager can forecast on continuous basis what the project completion will be, and based on the projection, the project manager can decide if there's a problem with the project and what are the alternatives for controlling that project and bring it back to what it was expected. So here's an example. So in that continuous line is the budget or the plan for the project. So we have a timeline, we have a cumulative cost, values, and progress, and this is what we plan. And then as we progress with the project, we can basically follow up on the status and see how well and how bad we are doing in terms of our plan. Another tool for control is the critical ratio. So this indicates when a task or process is becoming unacceptable. And typically, when the ratio drops below 1, then we know that something is going wrong with the project. So that's an acceptable and an unacceptable ratio. So by tracking the ratio, the manager can anticipate the problem. And here's an example of a critical or the critical ratio. This is how it is computed. So we have the actual progress divided by the scheduled progress times the budget cost divided by the actual cost. And that will give you the critical ratio. Note that this critical ratio is computed using two different ratios. So both of them are important. So note that the two ratios are equally important in the calculation of the critical ratio. And if one ratio is bad, it can be offset by the other ratio if it is equally good. So you can find a balance if you have a bad ratio with a good ratio. And Next, we have an example for the critical ratio. So here we have a project with 6 tasks. We have a computation. Well, we have different columns here. One representing the actual progress of your project. We have the scheduled progress of your project, the budget cost, and the actual cost. So when we compute those ratios, and then we multiply these two ratios, we get the critical ratio. So as you can see, for some of the tasks, we are doing well. We are close to 1, or 1, actually, and over 1. But then we look at these two tasks, and that ratio is below 1. So that can tell you that there's something wrong, or maybe not going as expected on those particular tasks. So task 2 is on budget, but progress is lacking. So too much money was spent that should be has been spent. When the project is completed, it will be probably over budget. So that's what's happening with this one. And as you can see, so the actual progress is below the scheduled progress. And then task 3 is on schedule, but it's over budget, created in another probable cost overrun. So that's this task. So when you compare the budget cost with the actual cost, you see that there's a difference, and you're spending more money. You're spending more money than the one you were planning for. And that's what's creating this ratio going below 1. And the critical ratios for task 4 and 5 both exceed 1. And none of the sub-ratios is a problem. Task 4 is ahead of schedule and on budget, and task 5 is on schedule and below budget. So you can get all that information from those ratios. Another thing that you can do is to look at those ratios for the whole project, not necessarily by task. You can group or aggregate the information for all the tasks and then compute the ratios. So beyond evaluating each of the activities of the project, the critical ratio for the project as a whole can be calculated as well. And that's what we're showing here. So this is the critical ratio, but this is grouping all the tasks for the project. And finally, how many of you have taken the course on quality control? So you know about control limits. You know that when you go above or below those limits, that you know that the process is out of control. So that's the idea that we can also use for controlling your project. You can find or compute some control limits, and then based on the progress of your project, then you can decide what to do. So if you are within these limits, you see that you can ignore what's going on. But then if you go below or above this limit, you can take another different decision, like investigate. And then if you go above that third limit, you should go and find out what's going on right away. Okay, so the project manager can also set some control limit. For the critical ratio, so that if they are exceeded, an investigation is in order. Okay? Any questions at this point? So that basically concludes the lecture on project control and project monitoring. There was one topic that I was not able to cover this semester, which is closing the project. And I would really recommend you to go and check that last chapter of your textbook. If you are interested in seeing it's a very short chapter. You can read it in 10, 15 minutes. And I will basically go over how the important things to consider when you are closing your project. Anything, any doubts, questions? So this is the last topic that is going to be included in the exam. Now we can transition to the review. So in terms of this third exam, you should expect something. So first of all, the exam is this Thursday, April 24th. You should expect the same format that you have seen in class for the first two exams. You're going to have 25 questions on your first part of the exam with multiple choice and true or false questions. And then on the second part, you will have 3 topical problems. Most likely it's going to be 2 numerical problems and 1 questions. It's the one you have seen before. So question and 2 problems to solve. I'm going to be providing you with the formulas that you need for those problems, so you shouldn't worry about that. And if you need any tables or probability distributions, those are going to be there in your exam. In terms of the topics, the first topic that's part of this exam is scheduling the project, and that's part of lecture 6B. So if you want to refer to the lecture notes, there we covered the calculating the activity slack and also project uncertainty and risk management. So we cover how to find the critical path for deterministic networks. Then we transition to probabilistic networks, and that's what's part of this exam. So calculating the probabilistic activity times, the probabilistic network, the probability of completing the project on time, and selecting risk and finding D. So that's the first topic. Then we went to transition to lecture 7A, which 7A, allocating resources to the project. So expediting the project, resource loading. Here's where we discuss how to crash a project, the decision making, how to make the decision in terms of which task you would crash first, and so on. So that's part of 7A. Resource loading, resource leveling, allocating scarce resources to project, and priority rules. So I highly recommend you to go and review those priority rules, because those are important. And then we move to monitoring the project, monitoring and controlling the project. So again, we split this topic in 2 lectures. So we start with monitoring the project, the plan, monitor, control cycle, the importance of data collection, and the earned value analysis. And finally, the lecture that we covered, or we finish today, is controlling the project. So project control, what is the purpose of control, and designing the control system for your project. Any questions? Your lectures are posted. I'm going to post the last one with the notes today. So it should have all the notes, all the videos by today, so you can have all the material that you need. Yes, sir.
Lecture 8A is missing the section.
On the note, can you send me an email? Yeah, maybe the computer didn't save it. So I'll send me an email. I will check. Any? Yes, sir.
YouTube channel on video.
You can check on. If you want to get the videos, you can go to tracks. And then here's a lecture videos link. And then you can click here, and it will take you to that channel with all the videos. Okay? So finally, in terms of the review here, if you want to read the chapters 5 to 7 of your textbook and then study the lecture slides and homework, and that will help you to do well in the exam. And then you know the exam is closed book and notes. You need to show your work and formulas using your solution. That will help me award partial credit or full credit depending on your answers. So any questions? Good. So now we can look at the case study for today. So if you go to tracks, you'll find the last case study for this semester, which is case study number 7. And as I mentioned, this is going to be a short case study. You will see that this is going to be asking you to compute some of the ratios that we discussed on the last two lectures. And based on those ratios and based on the description of the case, you're going to be answering some questions. So, so the questions are going to be answered based on our discussion on the material. So you need to know some of the details in terms of why some ratios are going to be high at the beginning and then not as high at the end. There's some considerations when we are taking a project that requires a lot of resources to be by at the beginning and so on. So take that into account when you're answering your questions. So you can print the case study and you can set up, you can join your teammates and start working on the case study. You have until tomorrow to submit the case study. But again, it's a short case study, so you can probably finish by the time of this lecture. So please get started and let me know if you have questions.